Good morning, everyone. I am Caitlin Myers, Training Coordinator at Sustainable Solutions Corporation, and thank you for joining us today. The focus of this webinar is Facility Sustainability Assessments. Our speakers will talk about what a sustainability assessment is and how it can benefit your facility's bottom line while improving overall sustainability. Now, let's get started because we have a lot of good information to cover this hour. After completion of this course, you will receive 1 PDH Professional Development Hour credit towards your professional certification. And just a quick reminder, this presentation is copyrighted. Now, the purpose of this course is to help you gain an understanding of how a sustainability assessment, or SA, can be a useful tool to facilitate or evaluate your facility. At the end of this presentation, you will be able to understand how a sustainability assessment can increase your profit margin, reduce waste, and improve production efficiency, evaluate manufacturing operations, identify sources of waste of all types, and provide innovative solutions that save money while reducing environmental impacts, and also quantify and highlight the advancements your facility has already made to improve overall sustainability. We have 2 great presenters today. The first is Jim Mellentine, Corporate Sustainability Manager at Sustainable Solutions. Jim works with organizations to refine and execute their corporate sustainability strategy. He has worked with dozens of companies to benchmark product and operations performance and recommend improvements. The second presenter is Kara Watson, Sustainability Specialist at Sustainable Solutions. Kara is a life cycle assessment certified practitioner. As a member of Sustainable Solutions corporate sustainability team, Kara provides sustainability assessment and other services to a diverse group of clients. As a reminder, today's webinar is being recorded and the link will be sent to everyone who registered. Jim and Kara will be happy to answer your questions towards the end of the webinar. So please send your questions through the side control panel at any time. And now, here's Jim.
Thanks, Caitlin. First, I'm going to just do a quick blurb about Sustainable Solutions. We are a sustainability consulting firm that offers a variety of services. First, in the area of corporate sustainability, where we help manufacturers and other organizations improve their products and operations and ultimately bottom line performance. We work with building owners and architects and designers to do green building projects such as LEED and ENERGY STAR benchmarking and NGBS certification. And we also offer specialized training and education for your employees, your sales teams, marketing teams, and other roles, either in a customized interactive way or remotely or in a variety of other formats. All right, so let me get this started by asking, what are sustainable operations? Well, when you look at sustainable operations, you have to look at it in a holistic manner and consider the fact that your manufacturing operation is a system of many sub-operations and equipment. You have to consider the energy, water, employee comfort and safety, cleaning, maintenance, and carbon footprint within that system. Now, there are as many different types of operations as there are manufacturing plants, and each plant has their own unique conditions and requirements. But in any facility, there's always opportunities for improvement in each of the categories that I just went through. Specific opportunities for improvement, of course, will vary, but for example, it's not uncommon that 5 to 20% energy cost savings could be achieved with minimal investment. Now, we call this webinar Lean and Green Manufacturing because the principles of lean manufacturing are in complete alignment with increased sustainability. And at Sustainable Solutions, we take the view that waste of any kind equals lost profit. And reducing those wastes should be a primary focus of improvement efforts. And I'm going to talk more about that a little later. So when we think about the benefits of sustainable operations, the #1 priority for many facilities is obviously reducing operating costs. And that means, for example, saving money on electric and water bills, reduced material costs, and also less waste hauling fees. Also, major studies have shown that improved employee comfort is linked to productivity. So that may be especially true if your facility has office areas. There are also potential benefits for increasing equipment life if they're properly maintained. So for companies with sustainability programs already, those initiatives that are implemented at your facilities can become marketing opportunities because you'll be able to show those decreased impacts and footprint at your facility, and that can help your marketing team develop some literature around that subject. All right, so let's talk about the business case for leaning your operations and what your customers and competitors might be up to. So the first question is, why should you care? Maybe things at your facility seem to be going just fine, or maybe you just don't want to rock the boat or create waves in your organization by suggesting improvements. One big reason that you might want to think about doing this is that in most cases, greener products are being demanded by customers, and those customers are either manufacturers that you're supplying, big box retailers, maybe distributors, or even the direct customer. Many customers or many companies are putting increasing transparency and sustainability requirements on their suppliers. I'll mention more in a few minutes, but organizations like Walmart, Home Depot, the United States General Services Administration, the U.S. Department of Defense, many architects and builders in the green building market, many of these are implementing these requirements. 60% of Fortune 500 companies have published a corporate sustainability report, and 3 out of 4 Fortune 500 companies report their carbon footprints to the Carbon Disclosure Project. So this really is the new way of doing business, and it's no longer just a minority of companies doing these things. So it's really important to pay attention. And it's not just a love for the environment that's driving this trend. There's really real money to be saved in these efforts, and if you have some bean counters at your organization, in many cases they're starting to realize that. Reducing material and resource costs is a compelling reason to pursue lean improvements in your operations. And so if you're still hesitant about making waves in your organization, instead think about that nice pat on the back you'll receive for saving your company money. After all, staying competitive in a free market is really inherent to sustainability. And if you're at an organization where there's long-term stagnation and no continuous improvement or innovation, that really can ultimately lead to lower profits, layoffs, maybe even plant closures, and no one wants that. If you don't sell directly to the end customer of your product, then your products probably are being purchased by some other organization. And a lot of those organizations have added sustainability to their list of supply chain and purchasing requirements. I mentioned a few of these names a minute ago, but all of the well-known companies you see here are evaluating supplier sustainability programs or requiring some type of transparent disclosure or otherwise making sustainability considerations a higher priority. And this is only a small sample of organizations that are doing this. There are many others that are not listed here, and you might want to take a look at your biggest customers to see what they're doing. In fact, a valuable activity that you could do to identify what's important to your customers is just to do a simple start by going onto their website and taking a look. Many organizations on their website have a sustainability link or corporate citizenship or corporate responsibility, and that link goes directly to details about their various goals and initiatives when it comes to sustainability. Moreover, if you've received questionnaires from your customers with specific requests, then you already know what's important to them and what they're looking for. So if you put all that information together, you might start thinking of some mutually beneficial solutions that are going to help your customer get closer to achieving their goals while at the same time helping your company and saving money. So let's talk about what is a sustainability assessment. It's really a facility-focused investigation that looks at the whole operation. You can look at existing or previously identified initiatives while you're doing this. That's potentially important, so you're not doing rework, but you're also identifying new opportunities. And I'll elaborate on what I mentioned earlier, but it makes things really easy to expand. If you expand the conventional definition of waste, and really any input that's not in the final product should be considered a waste. This could be things like waste heat, energy or water, scrap materials, off-spec or defect product, air and water emissions. You can use this broad definition of wastes to look at your operations in a different light. For example, look at how materials are flowing through the operation and where the waste material is being generated. Ask yourself, what is the root cause of that waste? Look for machines that are running when they don't need to be running. Maybe there are some areas of your facility, like some warehouses, where the lights are on and they don't need to be on all the time. Maybe there's water running when it doesn't need to be. Identifying those sources of waste is the first step in designing potential solutions and quantifying savings. Sometimes solutions can be as simple as educating plant employees or raising awareness, and other times those opportunities could require some investment. And in those cases, you need to have some data to back up that investment. Here's an example of how simple benchmarking can reveal some surprising results. These charts are from a facility where we were benchmarking electricity, propane, water, and waste. But when we went to visit the operation, we noticed how much packaging they were using and identified that as an opportunity for improvements. And when we showed this to our client, they were very surprised to see how much packaging was as a share of the other costs. And it represented a huge opportunity for them because there were definitely opportunities for improvement by reducing that packaging. My colleague Kara is going to talk a bit more about benchmarking and quantifying results in a few minutes, but once you quantify the payback for your identified opportunities and prioritize those opportunities accordingly, you'll be able to flesh out some solid recommendations. And these recommendations can include things like reduced cost and environmental impact, reduced carbon footprint, perhaps some recommendations for marketing your green successes and products if you identify some great things that are already going on at your facility, and also recommendations for a sustainable program development. Now, a sustainability assessment is a valuable activity in itself, but it shouldn't be a one-time thing. It's important to establish a sustainable operations program so that improvements can build on each other over time, and you can really make it a part of how all of the employees at your facility operate in their role. Using the benchmarking data that you collect is going to allow you to set goals and develop a sustainability team, or a green team, as some locations call them. You can develop a plan and goals with activities to improve performance in various areas, and you can it's important to know that getting buy-in and agreement from key stakeholders and action owners is really important to holding people accountable in this process. Solutions aren't always technology or equipment based, and there are many situations where a key operational improvement is going to require a change in a procedure or in people's behaviors in their role, and so the more buy-in you have from the people doing the work, the better the results are going to be. All right, so let's get into a little more detail and talk about benchmarking and measurement. Now, we've all heard the mantra before: if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. If you don't measure electricity, energy, or waste, you're not going to know if those changes that you want to make are even worthwhile, or if you make them, you won't know if they're successful. So if the company that we're working for doesn't already have enterprise software solutions set up, we typically start by setting up some simple spreadsheets to benchmark and understand that electricity, natural gas, water, etc., and also look at trends. Looking at trends on a monthly or yearly basis can also identify potential opportunities that might not be obvious by observing operations alone, especially over a short time period. And Kara is going to go into some more detail and show some examples of that in a few minutes. So far, I've talked about a sustainability assessment at a high level, but the first thing that you need to do, if you haven't already, is to benchmark your existing operations. It's often appropriate to quantify the amount of your materials, energy, waste, and other relevant factors per amount of production. So if you measure production in tons, you can do, for example, kilowatt hours per ton. If you produce in gallons or by piece, you can benchmark everything per whatever your production is. So that way, if your production goes up and down, your benchmarked amounts can be more comparable across time periods. You'll also want to collect cost data associated with each of those inputs, so you can do a cost-benefit analysis for potential solutions. And if investment is required, you can help create a business case for that. Once you have your initial benchmarking system set up, you can continue to add to it over time and track your continued progress. So for example, let's say you're managing your energy consumption and you have a goal established to reduce that consumption by 5% on a per production basis. Well, with the initial benchmark data, you can track your progress toward that goal using that existing benchmarking spreadsheet or system that you have. You know, sometimes it's difficult to track operations in as much detail as you would like, and so if you're not able to track those operations in a detailed way, you might consider adding some submeters or data loggers or other appropriate methods depending on the situation to get the level of detail that you need to make the case. So here is an example of how non-labor costs can be accounted and presented at a high level for multiple facility locations. So here you have 2 plants, and so if these plants have similar operations and one location is performing much better than the other, it may be worth investigating the reason for that difference. And so perhaps the plant looks like plant A in most cases has a lower cost per production than plant B. Maybe plant B can learn something from plant A. Maybe there's some method or system that plant A has in place that's making them more efficient. And so by all means, don't reinvent the wheel. If you have multiple facilities or a known solution that works at another one of those facilities, then learn from it and use it. That's an important piece of this, and maybe that's going to be a lower cost than starting from scratch. Now, water is sometimes a resource that gets a little less attention because it's really a low-cost resource compared to materials and energy. But you've also no doubt heard that much of the nation is in moderate to severe drought conditions right now, and water is getting much more attention these days because of that. So many communities across the country are looking to heavy water users, including industrial users, to come up with solutions to use less water. So if you're in that situation, consider that that could be very important, even if it's a lower cost compared to your other inputs. Benefits could obviously include lower incoming water fees, lower sewer fees. If you have an on-site treatment facility, you'll be using less energy and chemicals to treat that water, and also lower capacity charges and limits. Traditional materials waste is also getting increased attention lately as disposal fees increase, and now more alternative methods of disposal exist since the infrastructure has continued to grow. This is the waste management hierarchy that you see on the right from the EPA, and there's some suggested methods of diversion in order of preference generally. So, for example, you can obviously reduce waste at the source. That's the most effective and usually less expensive way to reduce waste. You can divert waste from a landfill by sending it to a recycler instead of throwing it in the dumpster. You could return materials to your supplier if possible. Maybe you can reuse some materials in the same process or in a different process. Redesigning a process to eliminate waste. You might be able to find a third party that is looking for a material that you're currently sending to a landfill. Maybe that's an input they can use. I know that we've done that in the past where we've worked for a client and they were producing a lot of mineral waste that we knew might be appropriate for a filler material in another product for another client we were working with. And so we connected them up and got a conversation started. Composting is now becoming more widespread across the country, although still not available in all areas. Anaerobic digestion with anaerobic recovery, and also a waste-to-energy facility for non-recyclable and non-economically recoverable materials. So take a look at the waste hierarchy and see if you can start to reduce waste to landfill at your facility. Now I'm going to hand the presentation over to Kara for more details about benchmarking and case studies.
Great, thanks Jim. Now I'll take some time to discuss some suggested conservation measures in sustainable operations, as well as I'll go over a few case studies that we've experienced with sustainability assessments. As Jim had covered, the first step of an essay is to track your performance with benchmarking. Now, there are many ways to look at trending data to begin searching for those opportunities. If you are working with a portfolio of facilities, comparing each facility in that portfolio to identify the largest consumers and maybe the more efficient consumers is a good place to start. In the upper right graph here, you can see that Plant A, which produces the same type of products as the rest of the facilities, is significantly higher than all the rest. But Plant K is much less compared to the others. Plants J and K, they might have a few techniques that could be used in Plant A, and you can start your focus comparing those two to see those differences. Additionally, looking at the performance of a facility on an annual basis, such as in the upper left corner, or even a monthly basis, like in this lower figure, those are ways to begin looking for opportunities in your operations. Seasonal trends can help quantify space heating costs and opportunities. You can see the carbon footprint of this facility on the bottom here. It increases by about 2/5 from winter heating for occupant comfort. Knowing this, focusing on improving energy efficiency for heating might be a good starting point. One main recommendation for sustainable operations is to look for reductions in heating energy. And there are two considerations that you can look for in energy. One is just utilizing waste heat. Any heat that's coming off of the top of your air compressors, boilers, heaters, that's wasted heat that you could use for space heating or for other areas in your operations. Also, just look for updating equipment, such as space heaters. Adjusting ductwork and adding more efficient heaters in those areas can often save energy with a decent payback. And on this slide, you can see an example of how to quantify alternative solutions to identify waste and present those options in an easy-to-understand way. We considered here two possible solutions for this facility that was very inefficiently trying to maintain a space for occupant comfort. The first idea that we had was just to use that waste heat from the heater and use it in the coils in the air makeup units to preheat that to conserve on natural gas. The implementation cost was high and the payback was long, so we knew the decision makers would not go for that solution. But the second solution we had was to adjust the ductwork so it provides makeup air at the point of discharge and to improve its controls. Then we also added, for additional occupied spaces, we installed high-efficiency radiant heaters in replace of their old space heaters. And this payback was much quicker and looked much more ideal, so this was the suggested solution. Waste heat recovery opportunities do exist in many manufacturing areas. The building in this picture is in a northern climate zone. It's in climate zone 4, and they had a very high heating load. We were able to collect all the waste heat from these air compressors that are right behind this wall. And there are louvers on the ductwork, and the ductwork goes right through the wall. The waste heat is then fed into 3 other spaces in the building. And this allows the natural gas to be shut off in that space that was used to heat that space. You could also collect waste heat from boilers, dryers, and other process equipment. This doesn't have to be just used for heat for a building, but it can be used for like preheating materials or even drying. Another item to consider is wasted heat just from open doors. The amount of time that a door is open is going to affect the amount of air exchanges within a building. High-speed roll-up doors minimize the amount of infiltration and exfiltration, and they can be designed with insulation to improve the building envelope. This will also help isolate the truck bays and allow forklifts to come in and out easily because they are high speed. Also, just enforcing the habit of closing roll-up doors when they're not in frequent use is another good starting point to saving energy. So this is the same building that I just mentioned before with the waste heat recovery, but I also wanted to mention a few other things done in this space. All these high bay lighting, their T5s are used in here along with tubular daylight devices. And if you can look at this picture, the round TDDs are the same brightness as the T5s, which are the electric fixtures. There are also daylight sensors installed to detect how much light is coming into the space from the TDDs to make sure the space has the lighting power density desired. And the sensors will also turn the T5s off if there's too much light. There's actually a waiting list for employees in this company wanting to work in this space because of the daylighting. Employees working in this space have decreased absenteeism, and all the materials have recycled content and low VOCs as well in this space. And additionally, a white roof was installed with additional insulation to help. And there were 4-way fans in this space that kick on at night to cool the space, and they also kick on when outdoor conditions are warm as well. And there are many other very low-cost opportunities for operations to consider in a sustainability assessment. With process equipment, just frequent adjustment and tuning of the equipment can keep energy efficiency high. I've been to a site before where the thermal oxidizer hadn't been tuned in quite a number of years, and just by that simple low-cost process of tuning it, almost $200,000 were saved in that next year just from propane reductions. Also, just by reviewing the benchmarked water data in that facility, we noticed that they had high water consumption compared to previous years, which led us to an investigation of water flows in the manufacturing process. A water leak had been found which, when fixed, it saved over 4 million gallons per year, which at the time was not, it wasn't picked up by them because water costs were so low, but now that water costs are increasing, it was definitely noticeable. And here is a sample of that water consumption of the facility that I just had mentioned. You'll notice that the consumption for the first half of 2012 was the same amount as the entire year before it, basically. And just investigating water flows through a facility and identifying where water is being wasted in operations can provide large water savings and costs. Check for open valves that can be shut, and look for opportunities that can use lower flows or closed-loop processes. Water is an area that is increasingly becoming of concern, as Jim had mentioned, just due to the scarcity in so many regions. Every building is going to have at least restrooms where water needs to be managed. Low-flow aerators can be installed on any faucet, and they're pretty cheap too. You can also do like a toilet retrofit and switch to dual flush. And dual flush means that you only have to change the valves. You don't have to change the entire toilet fixture. Low-flow shower heads also allow you to save water and hot water. And by saving water, you also reduce the energy used to heat that water. Also, water heaters such as electric or tankless can also be used to save money. Waste diversion is becoming a large topic for manufacturers, as producers not only have to pay for disposal costs, but they also lose money if that waste could have become product. As part of sustainable operations, identifying ways to minimize waste generated from your production lines should be your first action. So whether that's slowing lines down or trying to reintegrate scrap into the process, that can save you money. Secondly, finding alternate uses for your scrap can help minimize disposal costs. For one example, roofing facilities can send their scrap to asphalt recyclers, and these recyclers can mix it in with bitumen, which is then used in road construction. Many states now allow a certain percentage of asphalt shingles in the road, and it varies per state. PVC and other polymers also can send a lot of their regrind to recyclers, where they can grind it up and use it as pre-consumer materials in other products. But with all of these, preventative maintenance is really integral to optimize your equipment performance. Preventative maintenance will save you energy and water, it'll reduce waste, and maintain indoor air quality. It is really important to follow maintenance schedules with equipment in your building. Just like with tuning that thermal oxidizer, had they been doing that frequently, they would have saved thousands of dollars over the years. For those that have compressed air systems, there are almost always leaks with compressed air systems, since many of these systems have extensive networks of piping. Having comprehensive programs and policies for preventative maintenance, it's key to maintaining performance and reducing operating costs in the building. Also, developing a site-specific sustainability team is another aspect of sustainable operations. Incorporating a policy such as sustainable operations checklist and guidelines, that can be used by personnel for preventative maintenance. These type of guidelines could provide strategy and guidance on providing maintenance, as well as they can identify continuous ways to improve efficiency for water and energy. And they can also help provide ideas on how to reduce waste in your plant as well. Now, not only does incorporating a checklist and guidelines on sustainable operations help with conservation, these guidelines might also be used for purchasing at your facility. By providing guidance for new equipment, more efficient equipment can be installed instead of just the cheapest solution that's available. For example, say you need to buy a new air conditioner in your office area. One vendor trying to just make a sale might just recommend one of the cheapest solutions to fit your need, but it might be an energy hog and just not very efficient. If you have like a checklist in place, this might help your purchasers look at various items on what to look for when replacing that equipment, and that way you can save money down the road with a certain payback. And that's just one example with an air conditioner. Sustainable checklists and guidelines can also provide insight for plant equipment as well. Okay. So now that we've talked briefly about sustainable operations, let's talk about how sustainability assessments can actually contribute to your overall sustainability program. As a reminder, sustainability means that your company can stay in business for the long term. Sustainability means your company is profitable with good social responsibility and minimal environmental impact. Sustainability assessments can help meet your sustainability program's goals, since sustainable operations reduce the water, the waste, energy, and carbon. But they also reduce your operational costs. And these assessments can be used to identify specific opportunities in your plants for reductions, which can then improve your company's triple bottom line. For sustainable operations, initiatives should be implemented at a facility, and these include, first, just benchmarking. Develop ongoing benchmarking and create a system to assist with the development of goals for improvement. And if you have multiple plants, standardize that benchmarking across your portfolio for your company. And then develop a sustainability team for each of your sites. Train that team on the principles of sustainability and on sustainable operations. And conduct energy, water, waste reduction training for all of your plant personnel. That way, all employees working in the operations can look for opportunities to reduce these impacts. And some of your employees might have really good ideas because they're working every day looking at that equipment. And also, finally, integrate sustainable product innovation into the product development process. As new product development often includes looking for ways to reduce or maintain operational costs, this is a key, is getting it into your product development early. So what next? Well, conduct a sustainability assessment at your facility. To get started, benchmark and begin to measure your operations if you haven't already begun to do so. But then reduce the environmental impacts of your process. Reductions of energy, water, and waste means cost savings and improves social responsibility. And then you can even market some of those reductions to some of your customers looking for sustainability innovations from their suppliers. And then third, look beyond just the operations and look to understand the impacts of the actual products for now and the future, and then innovate upon that.
And with that, I will wrap things up. Now that you've completed this course, you should be able to understand how sustainability assessments, or SAs, can increase your profit margin, reduce waste, and improve production efficiency, evaluate manufacturing operations, identify sources of waste of all types, and provide innovative solutions that save money while reducing environmental impacts. And lastly, quantify and highlight the advancements your facility has already made to improve overall sustainability. I know many of you have submitted really great questions in the question pane on the side, and now Jim and Kara will answer a few, but please feel free to keep sending the questions our way.
Thanks, Caitlin. I have a few questions in the question pane, so thank you all for submitting those. Let me start with this first one. The question is, how is ISO 14001 different than sustainability, and why are both important, and how can I sell it to management? So I'm sure a lot of folks are familiar with this, but ISO 14001 is really all about environmental management systems and sets out the criteria for this system. So it's like a framework for following effective environmental management procedures, and so it's not that unrelated to sustainability. I think it's more of a subset focusing on environmental procedures at the plant. And so obviously there's similar benefits there of getting that certification, and that's important because many, as I mentioned before, many big customers are sometimes requiring that certification more times these days. And so, if you have those procedures and systems in place, you're going to reduce costs in energy, water, waste management, and other things. So I think that's right in line there. The next question is, what is a typical payback for recommended improvements? Well, obviously the quicker the payback, the more attractive it's going to be for those decision makers that are approving the funds for the investment that's required. So, typically when we work for companies, their acceptable payback is sometime between 1 and 3 years, usually around 1 to 2 years. But it really depends on the organization. Some organizations have a little bit of a lower threshold for conservation investments and sustainability investments, and some don't. So one thing that you might, well, first of all, it's important that when you're doing these types of sustainability assessments, it's important to keep that in mind, right? If you're looking at an opportunity that has a really long payback, it really doesn't make sense to recommend that. As Kara showed in her earlier slide, we looked at that space heating opportunity, and there was a couple of different alternatives that we wanted to take a look at. And if you remember, the waste heat recovery opportunity was actually not really feasible from a financial perspective because it had such a long payback, and that's why we ended up recommending the one with that had a payback of less than 1 year. One thing that you might consider doing in order to bolster your case is do some type of environmental cost accounting. Now, if you are considering let's say you're considering an opportunity to reduce a material, and it's maybe a material that is regulated because it's carcinogenic or something like that. Well, if you are reducing or eliminating that material, you may not only be saving money from not purchasing that material, but you're probably also reducing potential insurance costs for storage, regulatory compliance costs for keeping it on site, and other things that you might not think of for that you might be able to include in that payback calculation that might make it look a little more attractive, and that's not necessarily a direct cost for the material. So keep that in mind. Let's see. Our next question. It says the operations checklist must be at a very high level to accommodate all types of operations. And you're referring to the operations checklist that Kara showed a few slides ago. I think that's more of a statement than a question, but basically we usually customize that per operation. So obviously we have some high-level recommendations and procedures that can be used universally at all facilities, but it is very important to recognize that facility operations can vary greatly, and that's why we usually work with the facility to customize it for their specific needs to make sure it's the most valuable. So it's certainly customizable according to needs. All right, the next question is, we're in a region where electricity is cheap and makes payback periods longer. What can we do? That is a great question and something that we've encountered before. So in some regions of the country, electricity is much cheaper than in others, and if you're looking for a payback within a year or two, it can be a little more difficult. But it's still important to recognize that there's always room for improvement at any facility. So it doesn't mean that you can't find anything. And facilities where we've been at in this situation, there are still things that we've found, whether that be recommending variable frequency drive pumps or motors and other things. There's still a lot of opportunity that you might be able to find, and maybe they're not all the big hitters or big wins that you might find at others, but there's still things that you can find. So don't let that dismay you, and just like I mentioned before, there could be other costs that are not direct costs that you may want to consider in your calculations that might make it more attractive. The next question is, do you still recommend renewable energy? Well, that's on a case-by-case basis, I would say. I mean, obviously the incentives vary from region to region, state to state. So depending on the cost of your electricity and the potential incentive that's involved, that can drastically change the equation on whether it's a good payback. So if you are looking to, if your company has a mandate to have clean energy and it's not really an option, then of course, I mean, you want to find the most cost-effective way to achieve that, and that can also vary depending on your region. But if the decision is just based solely on payback time, then it's going to greatly depend on where you are, and you know, doing a feasibility and payback analysis on those options is going to be key. How about you, Kara? Have you seen any questions that you want to answer so far?
Well, one came in asking if there are any incentives that are available for large project improvements. And this is really on a case-by-case basis, whether it's depending on the region as well as the type of industry that you're in. But there is a helpful website called Desire, that's D-S-I-R-E, which can help break down all the various incentives that are available for conservation measures. And this other question is, how do you develop behavior change within an organization to help maximize efficiency? This is a really good question. Behavior change is can be very difficult and is often one of those hindrances that really can hang up a project. And my first suggestion would just be training, making sure that everybody on your team and in the facility actually understands and knows. And part of one of our recommendations is, for example, if you're at a dumpster and they're just throwing away lots of packaging materials, putting signs up explaining how much money that actually costs to not only to haul off that dumpster, but also all of those raw materials that are going in that dumpster. I think education is key, and really it's just driving in that habit of just repetition and providing incentives for those that do change their behavior.
Here's one coming in. Let's see. How do you reduce waste in chemical companies where waste portfolios tend to be more complicated? That's a really good question. We've worked with some chemical companies and also some pharmaceutical companies where there's more regulations in place, so it makes things a little more complicated, and you're right, that is a challenge. So one thing that you might want to consider if you're a chemical company is that perhaps you're manufacturing things based on market demand, and if you're at a facility that's multiple use, let's say, and you have different campaigns, perhaps at the end of each campaign you have to clean out all of that equipment and, you know, dispose of all of that effluent in a special way that costs a lot of money and requires a lot of effort. Well, if you plan ahead and are able to do longer campaigns where you don't require as much cleanouts, that's going to potentially save waste. And as long as you can support the logistics of that, then that could be one option to consider. I'm sure there's a variety of other answers based on your specific situation, but that's one. Here is another question about, let's see, how often do you recommend conducting a sustainability assessment? Yearly, every 5 years? Well, I think again the answer again is it depends. I mean, if you identify a wide set of opportunities in a sustainability assessment and they're all really good payback periods, and you know it's going to take, let's say, 3 years to implement all those opportunities, then you might not necessarily need to do a sustainability assessment every year. Maybe you need to run through most of your opportunities first and implement those before you do another one. You know, or maybe you are looking at doing a reduced scope sustainability assessment, or maybe you're not looking at everything all at once. Maybe you're just looking at energy, or maybe just water, and you know, maybe you want to do it more often and just switch the scope for your whatever you're looking at. So again, I think it depends on the situation, and you know, as long as you're getting good value from those assessments and continuing to make improvements that are proven to be successful, then I'm sure management is going to support you continuing to do those on a regular schedule. I think that's really the main message. Do we have any others there?
Not seeing.
I think that might be all of the questions. So if we missed your question or you have some more, go ahead and send us an email after this, and we'll be happy to set up a time to talk with you. Otherwise, we certainly appreciate everyone's time in joining us today, and I hope you learned a lot, and have a good day. Thank you.
Yes, thank you all again for attending today's webinar, Lean and Green Manufacturing Using Sustainability Assessments. I will be sending out a recording of today's presentation and the presentation slides to everyone who registered and attended. Also, as Jim mentioned, please feel free to contact Jim and Carol with any further questions. And let us know if you would like this presentation to be conducted at your organization. Also, because our May Corporate Responsibility Revolution Strategy to Success seminar was extremely successful, and we have been receiving requests to host this seminar again. The next one is on January 28th in Philadelphia again. And this is a hands-on, action-oriented workshop that will help attendees create and implement a corporate responsibility plan that supports a successful business strategy. For more information, you can go to the website listed, or you can contact us directly. TAD will also be conducting an informational session about this seminar next Thursday to help you learn more and get your questions answered. And also, please sign up for Sustainable Solutions' next webinar, Materiality Managing Long-Term Risk, on August 28th, and it's going to be presented by Tad Radzinski. Thank you all, and have a great day.